Hi, everybody.
Good evening.
Okay, I have 6 o'clock. Everybody ready? Ready up? All right. Good evening, everyone. Today's Tuesday, June the 1st, 2021. The time is now 6 o'clock. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Georgetown Planning and Zoning Commission. At this time, Maria, will you please call the roll so we can establish if there is a quorum?
Yes, good evening. Cherie Heinzman. Kayla McCord.
Here.
Tim Haney. Jay Warren.
Happy day. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Travis Perthius.
Here.
Doug Noble. Chris Stanley.
Here.
Jim Sawyer. Mike Tyland. Terry Williams.
Here.
And Tim Haney. So it looks like we do have a quorum. We're missing Commissioners Heinzman, Haney, and Noble, but we do have 4 commissioners.
Okay. Okay. So if we have any recusals, we'll have to have someone else
Yes,
involved.
we'll just need to move 1 alternate up for that item.
Okay. All right. At this time, I would remind everyone that the complete agenda for tonight's meeting and all the supporting documents have been posted to the city's website. If you have questions on locating this information, please reach out to the planning department staff. Tonight's meeting will consist of several parts. We'll have a regular agenda, consent agenda, and legislative agenda. Tonight's regular agenda includes item A. The consent agenda is items B through item AP. And the legislative agenda includes items, let's see, AQ through AU. So tonight's meeting is the teleconference. We have Ethan or Nat or one of y'all going to walk us through how to participate in that.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to do that. So tonight's meeting, tonight's teleconference, each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. If you'd like to speak during the public hearing, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature in the Zoom. Once called upon, please unmute yourself. If you're an applicant wanting to present on an item, please enter your name and agenda item in the chat, and you'll be promoted to have presentation abilities. If you're on the phone and would like to speak, please unmute yourself when the chair calls for public comment. This meeting is being recorded, and as the chair mentioned, the full agenda for tonight's meeting is at agendas.georgetown.org. If you are participating in the audience and you're having difficulty with your virtual computer, you can give me a text and I can give you my phone number and we can troubleshoot on how to get you into the meeting. My cell phone, work cell phone is 512-779-3531. Both Ethan and I will be administering this evening's meeting. So you can also use the chat function as a way to get a hold of us if you should need us during this evening's meeting. With that, Chair, I'd turn it back over to you to begin the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first item is public wishing to address the board. Persons may add an item to any future board agenda by filling out a written request with staff no later than 1 week prior to the board meeting. The request must include the speaker's name and specific topic to be addressed with sufficient information to inform the board and the public. And at this time, we have no one signed up to speak. So we'll move on to the consent agenda, which includes routine and non-controversial items, along with items that don't require a public hearing. Tonight's consent agenda consists of items B through item AP. Yeah, B through AP.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Looks like Tim Haney is on, so we do have 5 members, so we don't need to bring an alternate up for your item, the recusal.
Okay. Do we want to pull that item, or how do we want to?
Yeah, we can pull the item off the consent agenda to legislative, or we can leave it on the consent agenda, and you'll just need to recuse from the consent agenda since we have Tim now. So we do have 5 members. So with your recusal, just for consent, we'll still have 4.
Okay, we'll do that. That way we don't have to move that off of consent. At this time, are there any other items that commissioners need to abstain on? I know Kayla had questions on item B. So we need to address that, but are there any other items that we need to abstain on or commissioners would like pulled from the consent agenda?
Excuse me, Commissioner, item W will need to be pulled from the consent agenda, as it was put on there as approved with conditions, but it's actually ready for full approval. That's item W.
W. Okay. All right. Okay, not hearing any others. Are there any items that the public would like pulled from the consent agenda outside of item W? Okay, at this time, well, I know Kayla had questions on and there's some revisions needed to item B. Since I'm not voting on the consent agenda, that'll need to be, I don't know if we want to pull that item since it's just the minutes to go over.
Whenever a motion is made, we can just make the motion to include the changes to the minutes. For the minutes that Kayla mentioned, we need to make a revision for item BY, I believe. The vote was not listed, just the motion was made without the vote. And then also just to clarify the question that she asked during that item, just to change the wording.
Okay. So that'll need to be part of the motion. So at this time, commissioners, the floor is open to a motion.
This
And
is,
just-
oh, excuse me now.
I apologize. Just to confirm, Mr. Chair Perthes, you are going to recuse yourself from the entire consent item?
Correct.
Okay.
I will not be voting on the consent agenda in its entirety.
Okay, thank you.
So Kayla, was there I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Kayla, do you have a modification of that?
The modification was simply to get the vote in there and clarify my question that I asked at the same time, although that wasn't significant. So yeah, I don't think with those modifications, I think that'd be great.
Myrna, do you understand what Kayla's asked for? Ms. McCord
Yes.
asked for?
Yes, in item BY of the last meeting, she asked about if the shared use path would be in the right of way, but the minutes reflected if an exit would be in the right of way. So we just need to clarify, instead of it saying exit, that it's a shared use path, and then to include the vote as well.
So I'll make a motion that I'll modify my motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the modifications presented by Commissioner McCord. Somebody want to
Jay,
second?
I'll second.
Did you also intend to exclude item W?
We were gonna,
We were going to go ahead and vote on that. Is that correct?
I don't remember who wanted it excluded.
My understanding is item W has been pulled from the consent agenda, is now on the legislative agenda.
Correct.
So I'm going to make a third motion or modification to my motion. I'll move that the consent agenda as presented be approved with the amendment to item B as requested by Commissioner McCord, and item W withdrawn.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second that.
Okay. So Commissioner Stanley motion. I've got Commissioner Warren second. Myrna, will you call the roll, please?
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Tim Haney,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
Yes.
Okay, so the consent agenda carries 4 votes in favor, no opposed, 1 abstention. So if we're going, let's see. So if we're going to go in order, we can do item W first, which is, let's see, site development plan amendment. And this is Mr. Clark presenting this item.
Yes, sir. This is for a site development plan application. When we posted agenda, it was still needing some parkland related fees, but those have since been posted and paid in full by the applicant, so it is ready for full approval.
Okay, commissioners, any questions for staff on this item? Okay. Is the applicant present? Would the applicant like to speak on this item? Okay, not hearing any. We can open the public hearing. I don't believe we have anyone signed up to speak. Let me look and see. Does not look like we do. So we can close public hearing and entertain a motion.
Okay, I move that we approve as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Warren, second by Commissioner Haney. Any discussion on this item? If not, Myrna, you can go ahead and call the roll.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Tim Haney,
Yes.
Travis Perthews,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
Yes.
Okay, so that carries 5-0, which takes us to item AQ, which is a special use permit, and this was also Mr. Clark's item.
Yeah. Good evening, commissioners. Let me get the PowerPoint up. 1 second. All right, do y'all see the PowerPoint? Cool. So this is a special use permit titled University Gas Station being presented to y'all. Again, I'm Ryan Clark as presenting. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a special use permit for the fuel cells specific use in the local commercial C1 zoning district on the property located at 2701 East University Avenue, bearing the legal description of Lot 1, Block 1 of the University Vista subdivision. So this property is located just east of the downtown area and very close to Southwestern University, as you'll see in the following slides and maps. But it is also located near the intersection of Interloop and East University Avenue. There are a couple notable properties around this site, including the newly built fire station number 7. To the southwest, there's a memory care facility. Right across the street from the property is St. Helen's Church. And then there's also a large residential neighborhood to the southeast, and there's another one nearby to the southwest, as you can see. There are also residential properties along Wilbarger Point that extend northward. And most important of note is that there's actually an existing gas station with fuel cells already at the intersection of Interloop and University Avenue. And that'll be important when discussing the approval criteria later in this presentation. Just of note, this property, as we'll discuss later, is actually part of a gateway corridor. And so I thought it'd be important when looking at the site pictures to also note just kind of the great views that this property has. It sits on a hill. Just looking forward at the property, which is this grassy field here, you can see the recently built Estrella multifamily project. Most of the raw land to the north and going to the west, actually to the north, it extends all the way to the San Gabriel River, which you could see if there aren't trees on the way in this property. But anyway, a lot of that is owned by Southwestern University and is part of their planned unit development that will serve their future expansion. And that'll also, again, come up later in the discussion. So that's why I note it here, just to give you a visual. Also of note, you can actually see the Katy Crossing subdivision in the distance, which is right next to San Gabriel Park. So again, that along with the fact that looking at the property from the from the east looking west, you can see the university as well as even the Sheraton Hotel in the distance. That just can hopefully give you a sense of the location of this property as well as just kind of the view it gives as part of the Gateway Corridor. To the south, you can see the memory care facility here as well as the church. You can also see, looking east, the existing neighborhood that's surrounded by that wood fence. You can also see Will Barger Point, which again has other residential uses. Looking from this viewpoint, you can see the recently constructed, very nice looking Georgetown Fire Station #7, as well as the existing fuel cells. And this view from where I took this picture is right next to the property boundary looking east. So again, the existing fuel cells is pretty close by. Looking at the future land use map, this property has a community center designation, and that'll inform our discussion of the uses and the character of the area. Nearby, of course, is a special area designation that's part of that Southwestern University PUD, which is Plain Unit Development for those that may not know what that stands for. There is additional community center at the northwest corner of University Avenue in Interloop. And then, as we saw with the aerial, there's a lot of kind of neighborhood uses and neighborhood character to the south. At the zoning, this property is zoned C1 local commercial, as we previously stated, and because of that, that's why a special use permit is needed. Special use permits are required for fuel cells in local commercial district. There is, of course, a lot of RS that's part of those neighborhoods, and kind of important to note, and I'll hit on this later, but there's not really any other local commercial along this block and really in this corridor, because this Southwestern PUD land that you see, it extends all the way to the university, which then turns into downtown. So this is the last C1 essentially after that Interloop and University intersection going into downtown. And as many of you know, there are a lot of residential properties along this area. The only other C1 property is actually undeveloped, is actually the one directly southwest of here with that's undeveloped land next to the memory care facility. But again, besides that, the only other commercial is at that intersection. So SUP allows for the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council approval of uses with unique or widely varying operating characteristics or unusual site development features subject to the terms and conditions set forth in the UDC. The SUP also allows for additional restrictions to be placed on the use by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. There are 4 approval criteria for special use permits set out in UDC section 3.07.030. Staff, when reviewing this request and reviewing the requested special use, found that it partially complied with the first 2 criteria and it fully complied with the second 2 criteria. Looking at this first criteria, we found that the request was not detrimental to the health and safety of the surrounding neighborhoods or its occupants, and that was due to the current UDC standards in place that can mitigate any negative impacts to the health and safety of the area that can come with fuel cells and commercial development. However, when considering the fuel cells use in contrast with the already vested and allowed uses in the C1 district, we found that this comparatively was detrimental to the welfare of the surrounding neighborhood or its occupants. Hence why we gave it a partially complies. Again, the reasoning for that is that when looking at this area, this is the only C1, one of the only C1 properties that can serve a lot of the residences here in this corridor between Interloop and downtown. As I've discussed, there's already a fuel cells use at the corner, and beyond that, it's C3 to the north and just a few other C1 properties. And the reason we keep talking about C1 is because C1 is meant to be commercial and retail that serves these residential areas. It's meant to be local commercial. It's supposed to have pedestrian access to adjacent residential areas. And again, this C1 district is really meant to be something for the people in the immediate area and not something regional served. So again, going back to it, by allowing for fuel cells in this use, that's allowing specifically for a use that's regional serving. Fuel cells will be for people coming into and out of town. While it will be used by the people in these residencies, effectively allowing this use is going to eat up land that would have been used, could have been used for local serving uses. And again, because of that, that's why we found that it partially complied with that first criteria. Additionally, we also wanted to take a little bit of time to discuss the Southwestern University PUD. The university doesn't currently have an exact ironed out plan for the specific uses that you can, as you can see, just kind of vested land for them to develop at a later time. But I wanted to point it out because, again, the character of this area, to the north and to the west, you're going to have, educational uses. You're going to have dorms, you're going to have classrooms, it's going to be university. To the south, you're going to have all those, a lot of those residential uses, with a couple potential commercial sites here and there. And then to the east, you've got the intersection. But again, because of that, we found that, currently with what's allowed in C1, those current uses are better suited for serving this area in terms of the, student and university staff and the existing neighborhoods. Looking at the second approval criteria, we also found that this request partially complied. The reason for this is because, we did find that the proposed conceptual site layout, circulation plan design, we found that while the actual kind of design of the site is as harmonious as it can be, and as the applicants could make it, just in regards to the buffering and the water quality detention, they've mitigated as much of the potential negative impact as they could. But the most important thing we found is that the fuel cells use just was not necessarily going to fit into the character of the surrounding area. And that's why I found partially complies. Looking at the conceptual plan, they've got a lot of the necessary things required in the UDC. It's got a detention pond. It has a 25-foot landscape buffer that's required for the overlay district, which we'll discuss that more here in a sec. And it's, of course, got the 4 multi-fuel pumps arranged in a square as required for fuel cells in C1. So again, this has a lot of the necessary mitigation to kind of minimize that impact to the surrounding area. But, when looking again comparatively at what's currently allowed and fuel cells, we found that this is at least taking a step further away from the character of the area rather than moving it closer to the established character of the area. Looking at that, again, we've already discussed it a lot, but there's the Southwestern University PUD to the north and to the west, and then there's a lot of the residential uses to the south. This is a community center designation, and community centers are, again, they're really meant to serve the residents of Georgetown. This is directly from the 2030 Comprehensive Plan, and it's meant to be, local retail, professional office, service-oriented businesses. The community center uses conceptually are meant to be for the people living in that area. Fuel cells is really just more of a regional use. Additionally, this sits along State Highway 29 / East University Avenue, which, the 2030 Comprehensive Plan has designated as an urban corridor. These urban corridors, the important thing I wanted to call out here is it's meant to have a consistent appearance of buildings, low to moderate building height, and just kind of a higher density, but really the urban corridor is meant to have a cohesive urban feel that's pedestrian oriented, and has a consistent character. And again, when looking at the current uses of this area, that fuel cells we just found was moving away partially from that. It's not necessarily too detrimental because there's a lot of mitigation in place in terms of, the overlay district requiring that 25-foot landscape buffering. But again, just found it moving a step away. Anyways, moving to the final 2 criteria, we did find that did not have a negative impact on existing uses in regards to the public infrastructure and a lot of the other kind of built characteristics. And that was because the site plan that they gave us was in line with the Unified Development Code standards for that. And as such, that's kind of the city approved, that's kind of what the city's looking for. So it has the necessary water and sewer systems and public services in place. So we found that comply with that criteria. The final criteria, again, same thing. There are standards in place to mitigate creation of noise, glare, fumes, dust, smoke, vibration, fire hazard, etc., including things such as fuel cells have required maximum light generation and light pollution when next to residential areas. There's residential buffering requirements for C1 next to it. So we found that this request still complied with that criteria. Looking at the public notification, there were 11 property owners within the 300-foot buffer. To date, we've received 0 comments in favor or opposition from those notified. Notice was placed in the Sun News on May 16th, 2021, and signs were posted on the property. In summary, there's a public hearing and possible action on a request for a special use permit for the fuel cell specific use in the local commercial C1 zoning district on the property located at 2701 East University Avenue, bearing the legal description of Lot 1, Block 1 of the University of Vista subdivision. Per UDC Section 3.07.030, Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the City Council. The SUP also allows for additional restrictions to be placed on the use by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. That wraps up my presentation. Chair, back to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions for staff on this item?
I do. Ryan, how does a gas station satisfy the glare restrictions in the lighting? I mean, gas stations to me look like landing zones in our community. They're so grossly overlit.
I think while Ryan's in meeting, I can help answer your question. Our code has special lighting requirements for gas stations. So under a fuel canopy, the light is required to be flush with the bottom of the canopy. In addition to that, we have some lighting intensity limits that they have to meet at the property line. It usually does not stop that atmosphere you describe where it feels like it's lit up like a runway. But it does limit the glare at the roadway, and it prevents folks from having a light that would hang down that you would see from the road.
Thank you.
Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, you said it well.
This is Kayla McCord. Ryan, this is also located within the Scenic and Natural Gateway Overlay District, right?
Yes, ma'am. So the distinction we have that can be kind of confusing is that the official zoning overlay district is the Scenic Natural Gateway. But then in our, and that's its current, that's how it's currently designated as part of like the current, map within the 2030 comprehensive plan. But then it has a future, it has like a future land use designation, but really future corridor designation of urban corridor. So it's scenic natural now, but the comprehensive plan kind of intends for it to develop with a more urban pattern going forward. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. So the two can't ultimately exist in partnership, I assume.
Well, so, I think the big part of the overlay district is to provide for that 25-foot landscape buffer, which I think can be conducive or helpful to both urban corridors and, scenic natural corridors. But yeah, I think in terms of the uses meant to be in place, an urban corridor versus scenic natural are different.
Okay,
the urban corridor in this area, especially, is meant to kind of convey into the downtown historic area. It's really not that far from it. Like I said, it's right next to Southwestern University property, and then that transitions into downtown, as y'all know.
Okay, and my one last question. And I realize we don't know what Southwestern is going to do with the adjacent property, but it's assumed that it will be for educational uses and won't ultimately be used for residential purposes, even though there's a residential underlying base zoning on that PUD?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, they'll. I reviewed their website and their current master plan, and yeah, about what they have proposed is just additional university serving facilities. It could be maintenance facilities. It can be dorms, it can be classrooms. That was kind of all part of their agreed PUD, that it would just be additional expansion to the university. But as of now, we don't know specifically what will go right there next to it. But no, ma'am, it won't develop just a typical residential single family.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff on this item? Okay, if not, is the applicant present? Would they like to speak?
I believe they had said they would be. I don't know. Let me get adjusted so I can see if they're in the crowd. Sarah, if you're here, you're welcome to speak up now. If not,
Hi.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
thank you. We are present. I don't think that we have anything pertinent to add, though. I think y'all had really summed it up very nicely.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? If not, we can open the public hearing on this item. Let's see. Do we have anyone currently signed up to speak? I don't see anyone.
I'm not
No,
seeing
sir.
anyone in the chat space. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. If not, we can close the public hearing, and the floor is open to a motion.
This is Jay. I move that we approve as presented.
I'll second it. Tim Haney.
Okay. Commissioner Warren, motion for approval. Commissioner Haney was second. Any discussion on this item? Okay, if not, Myrna, will you please call the roll?
Kayla McCord,
No.
Tim Haney, Tim Haney,
Yes.
Travis Berthews,
No.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
No.
Okay, so that item fails 3 votes to 2, which will take us to the next item, which is AR, which is a zoning map amendment.
If I may, Myrna, just to clarify, the motion itself failed, but that did not result in a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is that correct, Myrna?
So the motion was made to approve, but because there are 3 no's, it is not approved.
Okay. Thank you.
So do we need to have another motion on that? In that situation?
Mr. Chairman, no further motion is required unless you.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure. Okay, so item AR.
Yes, sir. That is me. Let me pull up the presentation, if you don't mind. Commissioners, good evening. This is Nat Wagner to present to you tonight a request for initial zoning designation for a property known as the Heights at San Gabriel. This is a zoning map amendment to rezone a 19-acre tract of land and a 39-acre tract of land to the residential single-family zoning district and a 32-acre tract of land to the residential low-density zoning district. The applicant seeks to incorporate the subject property into the city limits through an annexation request of the city council and entitle it for development of single-family residential uses through the residential single-family zoning district and the residential low-density zoning district. According to the applicant's letter of intent, which is included in your packet, it describes their desire to develop the subject property with a mix of housing types consisting of 4 distinct sizes. The applicant is requesting that a portion of the property to be annexed, which is approximately 12 acres, default to the agricultural zoning district as an interim step prior to submitting an application for a planned unit development, which the applicant will also seek to diversify the density of residential uses of the property. The interim zoning designation will be evaluated independent of this request with a future zoning application. The proposed subdivision will connect to Quiet Creek Drive to the east and extend to the collector roadway to Highway 29, which I'll highlight here for you in the next set of slides. To give you a sense of where this property is located, this is in the western portion of Georgetown along State Highway 29. It is north of the South Fork of the San Gabriel, just east of Parkside Parkway and west of the Shadow Canyon subdivision, which is also known as Riverview. To give you a sense of the development pattern in the area, the subject property is heavily treed and enjoys approximately 1,600 feet of frontage along the South Fork of the San Gabriel. There is one structure that's used as a residence on the property, which has an access road leading out to State Highway 29. There are several caves and karst features identified on the subject property, which do play into the feasibility of this property's development. Some of the features are sensitive recharge features, and as is expected over the Edwards Aquifer. Additionally, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife have identified an occupied site and sensitive salamanders habitat along the western boundary of this property, which also has an impact to the feasibility of developing this property. There are similarly developed properties both to the west and to the east, and then along State Highway 29, there are some commercial properties which exist. We do look to the future land use plan to give us guidance as to how this property should develop. This property is identified as the mixed density neighborhood feature land use category. It does, as I mentioned, enjoys proximity to nearby residential uses and does have a planned major collector on the east side of the property, which the applicant will be constructing up to State Highway 29 as part of their approved traffic impact analysis. To the west is Parkside Parkway, which is identified as a major arterial. We look to the zoning map to identify what is on the ground with its entitlements. There are several properties which are outside of the city limits and therefore do not have zoning, but do have development agreements in place, which have lent themselves to a residential development pattern east and west along the corridor. The vast majority of development has been single-family subdivisions on the south side of the highway. Small sites are reserved for neighborhoods serving commercial at the front of many of these large subdivisions, such as Shadow Canyon, also known as Riverview, Water Oak North, and Coal Estates. A large commercial site, which is known as the Preserve at Water Oak, was recently approved at Parkside Parkway and State Highway 29. As described in the 2030 plan, the property is designated as a mixed density neighborhood feature land use, which is meant to be primarily residential in use. It does allow for supporting non-residential uses of up to 20% as a target. It does provide for a variety of housing types, as I mentioned, is in the applicant's intent with the zoning districts that they are seeking. The form of those residential uses could be anywhere from duplex to moderate density multifamily. Within this mixed density neighborhood, we do look for compatibility of these residential uses. We look at things like lot size and setback to help with the compatibility there. And we do look for a transition of the uses and connectivity. as part of the land plan. And when we think about transition of uses, we do think about the State Highway 29 that runs north along the property. And when we think about those transition of uses, what the future land use plan is seeking is that those intense commercial uses be located up near the arterials, and that those less intense commercial uses or less dense residential uses be located further away from those supporting roadways. This property is along the Gateway Overlay Zoning District, and it is identified in the future land use plan as a urban corridor. It does have policies about the preservation of, the appearance of the corridor as an important feature to strengthen Georgetown's image and feel, and it does suggest that we work to maintain those enhanced features of landscaping. Would like to share with you just a general layout of the zoning districts which the applicant is seeking. As I mentioned, there are 2 residential zoning districts that the applicant is requesting tonight. There's the residential low density zoning district. A portion of this property does abut a occupied site, and so there are federal standards which the property developer has to accommodate, which only allow for single family detached, which would include our residential estate and our residential low density zoning district uses, which are allowed per the Unified Development Code. And so you can see here that parcel 3 is identified, and the applicant is seeking that residential low density district. The other 2 parcels which the applicant is looking to entitle are parcel 2 to the northwest, which is residential single family, and then parcel 4, which is residential single family to the south. As we do look for compatibility as recommended by the future land use map, we do look to the dimensional standards of these zoning districts, and you can see that the residential low density does provide for larger setbacks, primarily to the front and the sides. It also allows for requires a minimum lot width of 70 feet. The pattern in which the residential low density does support are those traditional single family neighborhoods, which have larger lots than what you would find in the residential single family district. The residential single family district does yield generally medium density neighborhood. They do include similar dimensional standards that the residential low density. You'll note that the front setback is generally the same, but the side setbacks are less than what you would find in the residential low density, and the minimum lot width is less than what you would find in the residential low density. To give you a sense of what is allowed by right, it is primarily residential neighborhoods, but does allow, with limitations, some things like golf courses, elementary schools, public parks. And then there are things that are permitted with a special use permit. Those things include middle schools, emergency service stations, or bed and breakfasts. Similarly, the residential single family zoning district is a residential zoning district. It is intended to support single family detached traditional neighborhood design. It does allow things with limitations such as home-based businesses or elementary schools. And then there are uses associated which require a special use permit, like a daycare or an office or a hospice facility. In reviewing the approval criteria in the Unified Development Code, we did find that the application was complete and allowed for sufficient information to make provide criteria for your consideration. We did find that it did partially comply with the comprehensive plan for one particular reason. The existing land use today exceeds what the target ratio is in the mixed density neighborhood. And I'll share with you in the next slide what that looks like. In terms of evaluating what is on the ground today, there is approximately within the study area, which I will share with you, we found that there's about 83% of the land uses are residential in nature. About 5% of those are non-residential in nature. Should this request move forward with its residential zoning district request, that target ratio would move closer to 89% residential, with 5% remaining either unentitled or in the or ag zoning district. What I'd like to share with you, I apologize, I'm trying to find that slide. I just wanted to share with you where the area that we're considering in this for this target ratio, excuse me. This includes the area south of State Highway 29, west of the Southwest Bypass. This is about a 1,500 acre area that we're evaluating for the target ratios as we look at what's on the ground today. The subject property itself is about 91 acres, so about 5% of the subject area is contributing to these target ratios. I'd like to point out some key locations and some complexities to this request. You will see that the subject property is hatched in black. It does sit south of State Highway 29, so these properties do not abut State Highway 29. So it's reasonable that they develop in a residential type use as opposed to a property abutting State Highway 29. You will see that the areas north of the subject property between there and State Highway 29 could allow for some additional commercial development, but even further north of State Highway 29, given that Whisper Oaks is a planned major collector which will intersect State Highway 29 and continue north, as well as Parkside Parkway to the west is a major arterial with an extension planned north of State Highway 29, could allow for some additional commercial development. And so the development pattern here right now is very linear east to west with residential uses, but if and when these major thoroughfares are extended, they could allow for some key locations for some additional commercial development. The other two remaining criteria, we did find that it was compatible given the adjacency of those residential subdivisions and given the sensitive environmental features and the topography of the development, it is suitable for the use, the residential use. As required by the Unified Development Code, we did notify property owners within the 300-foot buffer, and we did advertise in the Williamson County Sun. To date, we have not received comments opposed nor those in favor. As I mentioned, this is a zoning map amendment to rezone 19-acre tract of land and a 39-acre tract of land to the residential single-family zoning district and a 32-acre tract of land to the residential low-density zoning district upon annexation. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, this is a public hearing, and the UDC asks that the Planning and Zoning Commission make a recommendation to the City Council. The applicant, Ms. Rachel Shanks of Blackburn Homes, is present this evening and has prepared a presentation for the commission. Following this item this evening, this request will be forwarded on to the City Council at their meeting in June and then again at a meeting in July. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And as I mentioned, the applicant is here this evening.
Okay, thanks, Nat. So the applicant has a presentation. If you want to state your name and address, we'll give you 3 minutes to present.
Hi, my name is Rachel Shanks. I am in the Land Acquisition and Development Department of Blackburn Homes, and I'm going to share my screen. No, hold on. So our property, we are calling it Heights of San Gabriel. It's located about 2 miles west of I-35. And I wanted to, can you guys see my screen?
Rachel, would it be helpful if I shared the presentation for you?
Okay, it's not letting me share, I guess.
How's that?
Okay.
Rachel, are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, I am now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So our project's called Heights at St. Gabriel. We're about 2 miles west of I-35. You can go to the, I don't know if I can, next slide. We're Blackburn Homes. We actually started in the greater Austin area in Georgetown with our first project in 2007 called Oaks of Wildwood. And we have spread to Round Rock, Pflugerville, Leander, and Kyle. And we're excited to be back in Georgetown doing this residential development. Next slide. Our project is 105 acres. We are kind of adhering to the mixed density residential development where right now it's going to be ag as parcel 1, but eventually it'll be a PUD with a smaller product for a variety of different lot sizes and price points, which will give us 284 homes throughout the entire project. I wanted to highlight the connection points that we're making. We're extending the major collector road from Riverview Shadow Canyon. We purchased half of the right-of-way to connect our property to Highway 29. And then through the Bagwell track and Water Oaks and Parkside, our property will also connect to Leander Road through Parkside Parkway. With all of these residents coming to the area and all of these roadway improvements, our traffic impact analysis came back with us contributing $379,000 to improvements near on Highway 29. And this includes covering 100% of the traffic light at Highway 29 and Whisper Creek Drive. This traffic light will give us, 2 hard corners for commercial. So while we don't own these properties, I just wanted to make note of them. The Emily Kim LLC, which is west of the major collector road with about 526 feet of commercial frontage. And then Horace and Norvell and Lula have about almost 1,000 feet of frontage. And we're actually going to be providing them with utility stub outs for their future commercial development. Another great aspect of Heights is with our 105 acres, we have about 41 acres of open space and parkland, which is allowing us to have walking trails, a swimming pool, playgrounds. I think one of the biggest things for City of Georgetown is we are continuing that trail, the San Gabriel Trail from Riverview and eventually connecting to Water Oak and Gary's Park. And with that, I just wanted to see if you guys had any questions, and we are excited about this development. Mark Baker, our land planner, is here, and Steve Jamison, our civil engineer, as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any, first of all, do we have any questions for staff on this item? Okay, I have a question. Now, on your land use, the yellow and red charts, the graphs, I can't remember off the top of my head now. I should have written it down what y'all are calling them, but the land use ratios, yeah. So you showed the property, the amount of acreage that's included in that. What does the actual map area look like? So I guess my question is the intersection of 29 and Ronald Reagan included in that ratio? Or just this section here?
So it's just the section south of 29. It does not include any major right-of-way. So there are local streets within like the Riverview subdivision, the Water Oak subdivision, which we're counting towards the acreage, but the major roadways like 29 and Ronald Reagan are not included. So it's everything west of the Southwest Bypass, south of 29.
Gotcha. So I guess my thoughts on it are if you were to include the intersection of Ronald Reagan and 29, that land use ratio would look different. You would include more commercial and less residential, correct?
Right. Yeah. There are definitely breaks here that change the calculation in terms of where additional commercial development is feasible, particularly at those major intersections.
Because
If I can add on to that, our calculations stop here just short of Ronald Reagan because that's where jurisdiction ends. If you had a more holistic look, you could extend the calculations into what is Leander territory to capture that intersection where the new HEB is going. But since this is what we have control over, this is what our jurisdiction lies, this is where we've done the ratio.
sure, no, and that makes sense. I mean, looking at 29, a lot of these properties that have developed over here as single family residential, you know, the tracks on the 29 facing portion of these properties, a lot of them have either begun to develop commercial or have been left open for commercial, or, you know, like this one, they don't own a large part of the frontage of this, but likely that would go commercial. So I know that land use ratios have been an interesting topic in a lot of these discussions, and I guess my thoughts on it are this section, as you get closer to Ronald Reagan, while it may not be included in our jurisdiction, will provide a good deal of, you know, commercial accessibility to some of these houses. So that's just
And it also, it looks like a typical wise development in terms of, I'm assuming it's the original landowner is withholding, it doesn't really matter, withholding the land that's has the commercial frontage potential, and everything behind it is residential. And I'm not sure what else you'd use that for, considering what else is already there.
right. I agree. I mean, this is one of this is one of the ones that when I started looking at, while it does seem to skew the land use ratios, it seems like this is pretty well thought out in how it's laid out and how it will develop. So we have any other questions for staff from commissioners? If not, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant on this application? Okay. If no questions for any of those, let's see, we can open the public hearing. I don't see any hands raised, and there are no messages in the chat, so we can close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
It's Jay. I move that we approve as presented.
Stanley, second.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kayla.
That's
Somebody, who we got? We'll go with Commissioner Stanley. So we have a motion and a second. So any discussion on this item? If not, Myrna, would you please call the roll?
Caitlin McCord,
yes.
Tim Haney,
Yes.
Travis Berthews,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0. So that'll take us to our next item. And this is Michael's item, which is item AS and is a zoning map amendment.
Mike, I think you're still muted, or we're having some audio maybe. No, cannot hear you. You are welcome to.
So do y'all have him down in a basement somewhere?
No, I can pull up his presentation if that's helpful for Mike, and he can present from my desktop, or if he gets his audio online. Still missing your audio, Mike. Okay.
You're good. All right. Screen is shared. Audio on. Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, sorry about that. Now you can hear me and you can see my PowerPoint
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, this item, public hearing and possible action on a request for a zoning map amendment to rezone an approximate 34.64 acre tract of land located in the Joseph P. Pulsifer Survey, abstract 498, from residential single family, agriculture, and plan unit development with the base zoning district of general commercial C3 to public facility zoning district for the property generally located at 1333 West University Avenue, case 2021-5 REZ. I guess, so sorry about that confusion at the beginning there. But as I mentioned, this property that we're looking at tonight is at 1333 West University Avenue. The 34.64 acre property is directly adjacent to 3 roadways. We have the West University Avenue to the north, the DB Woods to the west, and the Wolf Ranch Parkway to the south. As you can see right across DB Woods, we are neighbors with the Georgetown Church of Christ. We are cat-a-corner to the Caddy Sports and Outdoors. This is the senior living facility they're in the process of constructing right now. And then we have the Blexy Wolf Ranch multifamily to the east, along with the slightly older aerial, but this is the new 7-Eleven location right along West University. Looking at the future land use of this site, you can see that the property is within the mixed density neighborhood future land use designation. You see that there is a small portion here that is in the regional center, but upon review, staff found that it was appropriate to have to consider the entire property within the mixed density neighborhood. Mixed density is also found to the west and to the south, and then we have the regional center to the east and to the north. The mixed density neighborhood has the targeted future land use designation with 80% residential and 20% non-residential. As of today, we are currently at 87% residential. We're about 1.8% non-residential, and we're about 10.5% of ag or unentitled property. Looking at the zoning map here, we can see that there is a small strip of residential single family along West University. The majority of the property is within the AG agriculture. And then we have a small portion here that's in the C3 general commercial zoning district. Should note that this C3 portion here is part of the PUD for the Wolf Ranch Hillwood area. And this lighter shade of green that you see along West University is because this property is also part of the scenic highway buffer yard. Again, the mixed density neighborhood future land use designation, the primary uses are single family homes, but secondary uses may include neighboring retail, offices, and civic uses, and it has a dwelling units per acre target of 5.1 to 14. Listed here, you can see there is a small list of uses that are permitted by right within the public facilities zoning district, followed by a second list of uses that may be permitted with certain limitations, following a third list here with a small group that may be permitted after the approval of a special use permit. Looking at the criteria for a rezoning request, staff found that 5 out of the 5 criteria does apply. To begin with, the application was deemed to be complete. Number 2, looking at the being consistent with the comprehensive plan. As we mentioned, the subject property is located within the mixed density neighborhood. While the mixed density encourages traditional single-family housing. As we mentioned, the secondary uses do include office and civic uses. Furthermore, the public facility zoning district is intended to provide a location for government or for public facility operations. Looking again, if this proposed rezoning request were to go through, we can see that we would get just a little bit smaller here with the residential portion, but we would get a little bit closer with the non-residential, going from 1.8 to just over 8% here. For the third criteria, the proposed zoning district will not negatively affect the health, safety, and general welfare of the area. The subject property, as we mentioned, is directly adjacent to 3 thoroughfares: West University, DB Woods, and Wolf Ranch. Furthermore, we are neighbors to the east with the multifamily Lexi Wolf Ranch, and this is the detention pond for the Blue Bonnet Plaza. As you can see, the church is already developed, but this southern portion here, once this were to come in with a site development plan, they would require a 15-foot landscaping buffer to their neighbor to the east. And looking at the last 2 criteria, the zoning being compatible with the present zoning and the property to be rezoned is suitable. While there is no public facility zoning in the immediate vicinity, the subject property's proposed zoning request is still compatible with the nearby property and the character of the neighborhood. As we saw on the previous slide, the northern 20 acres of the site is established as the First Baptist Church. The church does also own the southern 12 acres. Therefore, the proposed zoning amendment would provide uniformity to the entire site. Furthermore, the subject property is neighbors with the Georgetown Church of Christ to the west, showing that it is conformance with the character of the neighborhood. And furthermore, for this C3 small area, about 2.8, just under 3 acres in size. As we mentioned before, that was part of the plan unit development for the Hillwood. However, this area has always been intended for non-residential development. So staff does not see that there would be any conflicts. Oops, and then my last criteria, being that it's 34.64 acres, the subject property to be rezoned is suitable for the uses permitted within the public facilities, and it is of adequate size. Within a 300-foot buffer, 17 property owners were contacted. Notice was placed in the Sun newspaper on March 16th. Signs were posted on the property, and to date, staff received 1 written comment in favor of the request. Per the UDC, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council. I am here to answer any questions that you may have. I believe the applicant or representative of the church, Mr. Danny, I believe it's pronounced Marriott, is with us this evening. He does not have a presentation for you, but he is here to answer any questions that you may have. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff on this item? If not, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant on this item? Okay. Not hearing any. And we can open the public hearing. We do not have anyone signed up to speak. I don't see any hands raised or anyone in the chat, so we can close public hearing. And at this time, the floor is open to a motion.
I move we approve.
Okay, we have a recommendation from Commissioner Stanley for approval. Commissioner Warren, second. Any discussion on this item? Okay, Myrna, will you please call the roll?
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Tim Haney,
Yes.
Travis Perthews,
So what?
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. So with that, takes us to item AT, which is a zoning map amendment. Ethan, are you presenting this item?
Yes, sir, I am.
Lucky you.
Sophia is enjoying a much needed vacation this evening. Let me get my screen set up here. Thank y'all for flexing with us tonight. Here we are. Well, thank you. Our last legislative item tonight is a request for a zoning map amendment, another rezoning. The property is about 12.3 acres in size and is currently part of a PUD. What is being requested tonight is to remove this 12.3 acre property out of the PUD and zone it into our industrial district. So the property we're going to be talking about is sits between Airport Road and I-35 north of the Aviation Drive extension. If you've driven down Airport Road, you've probably seen some work going on the east side of the property where a road's being cut in and two new industrial warehouse type buildings have gone up here on this new road called Velocity Drive. The property to the north is generally undeveloped. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. As is all the other property around it, save for those two new industrial buildings. We do have some permits under review for the property along the Aviation Drive extension. However, those have not yet been approved. The existing industrial park there has many different types of businesses in it. Some that serve the airport, some that serve other purposes. We do know it's not set in stone. Property that this is being portioned out of to the west of the subject property is intended to be used as part of a future GISD campus of some sort. Previously, we've considered a rezoning here just north of Halmar Cove along Airport Road. And there we got to discuss a few things about the employment center here on both, the employment centers along both sides of I-35 and those regional centers. As Nat mentioned earlier, these areas on the future land use map are not set in stone and are more of a bubble map and are flexible depending on property lines and that sort of thing. So the subject property tonight sits partially in the planned employment center area and partially in the planned mixed-in-C neighborhood area. That mixed-in-C neighborhood area, as we'll see here in just a sec, is planned for your traditional neighborhood with supporting retail. In your employment center area is, like we've talked about before, that place where you expect larger users with industrial size, building footprints, more auto-related, more dependent on truck traffic, and more geared towards warehousing, manufacturing, and office parks. So when we look at our future land use ratios for each of these areas, we see that our employment center is right nearly at our preferred 80-20 split, 80% non-residential, 20% supporting high density residential that we want to see. And this mixed density area, for a variety of reasons, is not really developed yet, but is obviously beyond our preferred split of 20% commercial versus 80% residential. One of the reasons the subject property is undeveloped, as is most of the property to the north, is that it's part of a former PUD. So you'll see the pink area this is in has that hatch over it, identifying it as a PUD. And then to the north, you'll see some single family zoning, that brown, light brown, low density multifamily zoning. And then to the south, you'll see the purple for industrial, where we see that new industrial park coming in. The property to the north, where you now see the straight zoning, is part of what used to be called the Three Forks PUD. This PUD was approved in 2008 and has never really developed. It started out nearly 360 acres in size, and only the 70 acres that you see here in red remains. So where the yellow star is about where our subject property is, and it has a commercial base zoning but this PUD has a local commercial based zoning, but this PUD has very specific prescribed street cross sections and a street network prescribed that just do not that make it functionally obsolete without the whole PUD intact. So removing this portion of the PUD tonight is not necessarily a large concern, but I do think this is this was a very ambitious PUD. And this can give you an idea of what can be done here with the surrounding properties. Like I mentioned tonight, the applicant is requesting to come out of this PUD and into our industrial district, which will support those uses preferred by the employment center district. Those larger manufacturing uses, those uses that may not be appropriate to place directly adjacent to single family residential, and those things that may require access to freeways for trucks and that sort of thing. Yes, there are a number of uses. This is our most permissive zoning district, our most intense zoning district. And so most things will be permitted by right. Some things like restaurants or supporting retail uses are only permitted either at a loaded scale or with a special use permit. So when we reviewed this request against our approval criteria, of course, we had a complete application, but where we found, we did find that it was compatible with the present zoning conforming uses of adjacent properties. You have that industrial park to the north, and this makes a logical extension of that. And we did find that there were no natural features on the property that would prohibit development here. However, we did get stuck when we got to criteria number 2 and 3, consistent with the comprehensive plan and promoting the health, safety, and welfare. Primarily when it comes to a comprehensive plan, the boundary is flexible. And so there's not terribly much concern about the employment center getting slightly larger, right? This would just be settling it along settling that boundary along property boundaries. But it does not, including this in the employment center is definitely an expansion of the employment center. So you have to consider that, but it does not necessarily impact our land use ratios. Whether you consider it as a part of the employment center area or the mixed and C neighborhood area. The primary concern in relation to the public health, safety, and welfare comes from just placing, comes from pulling additional property out of the PUD. Will leave you with about 58 acres of random PUD zoning that does not work well together. And because of the shape of the property, it could pose some potential use conflicts and nuisances between uses, as it already borders some potency multifamily zoning, some residential zoning, and a future school campus. So, but in general, we still able to find that it partially complied. We did send public notice and posted our signs on the property and did not receive any written comments on the request. So we do ask that you hold a public hearing. I'm available for questions as well as the applicant.
Thanks, Ethan. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff on this item? Did you say the applicant is or isn't here?
They're here if you have any questions, but I don't think they have a presentation for you.
This is Clayton. Ethan, that is correct. We do not have a presentation. Ethan did a good job, and we're here to answer any questions. We're just looking to extend the industrial park that's already going on to the south into this area and make it one cohesive space.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay. If not, we can open the public hearing. Don't believe we have anyone signed up to speak this evening. So we can close the public hearing, and the floor will be open to a motion.
Move for approval. This is Stanley.
Okay, we have recommendation of approval. Commissioner Stanley,
I'll second that.
Commissioner Haney, second. Any discussion on this item? If not, Myrna, would you please call the roll?
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Tim Haney,
Yes.
Travis Berthews,
Yes.
Jay Warren, Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes 5-0, which brings us to our final agenda item, which is AU and updates from other boards and commissions. So Ethan, Nat, do we have any of those this evening? Let's see.
No updates this evening, Mr. Chairman. Just looking forward to our first in-person meetings again in July.
Yeah, so let's see. So we'll have one more of these.
Yes, sir. So should be our last 100% virtual Zoom will be our June 15th meeting. And we should be back in person in the council chambers on July 6th.
Okay. Yep. Our next scheduled meeting is June the 15th at 6 o'clock. Well, if that's if we don't have any other questions, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Commissioner Stanley, motion to adjourn. We have a second.
Second.
Kayla, second. Murray, will you call the roll?
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Tim Haney,
Yes.
Travis Berthews,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Chris Stanley.
Yes.
So that motion passes, and so it's 7:24, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.